Hello, Cyclocross friends, and welcome to episode 162 of Cyclocross Radio. On today's show, this is a special bonus episode, a conversation that I had with Stephen Hyde at the Washington, D.C. Rapha Clubhouse on the Thursday night before DCCX, and you're really going to dig this conversation. It was great to talk to Stephen and hear some old stories about how he came up in racing, and especially pertinent to that the DCCX weekend, how he used to live in DC and he raced in DC, and he has just some wonderful stories about that. And I think it's something that you are all going to appreciate. Why I'm doing this, and this is sort of a double episode week, is that I really want to highlight that this is the Wide Angle Podium Network donor drive. So hopefully you're listening to this. Maybe if you haven't listened to Wide Angle Podium shows in the past, or even Cyclocross Radio in the past, and I have some fresh ears to talk into, and I can just take a second here and tell you about what we do at Wide Angle Podium. It's predominantly a podcast network. We have shows like the Slow Ride Podcast and the Consummate Athlete and Bike Shop CX and the Gravel Lot and this show, and also a new show, Grodio, which covers gravel racing. And we spend a lot of time, and they are passion projects, but it is a job and a business for us. And to make it work successfully, we do have advertising on it. You'll hear me read our sponsors for this show in a second, and I'm extremely grateful to have them. But that's only a portion of how we are able to do what we do. The larger part of it is support from you. And I personally, this show, we put up hundreds of hours of content a year. And I know, looking at the numbers, that there are thousands of listeners who download it, and that's across the board with all of the other shows too, to the point that we are over 2 million downloads. Heck, I forgot about Life in the Peloton, another amazing show that we just brought on with Mitch Docker. You know, that's like the proest of pros, and he is under the Wide Angle Podium banner. Amazing show. Go subscribe to that one. But he's on the same plan as the rest of us, in that we need your help. We need you to contribute anywhere from $5 a month up until whatever you want to give, $50 a month. We have some $50 a month subscribers as well. This is our donor drive, so if you sign up now, we'll send you some swag. We got these cool arrow pins they'll make you faster. We have stickers, we have fidget spinners, bottles, all cool stuff, but that's beyond the point. What we want more is you to be a part of our community and to have a stake, an ownership stake in what we do, and that's what you get by becoming a member. So wideanglepodium.com, you can click on the donate button there, or if you just go to wideanglepodium.com/donate, it'll get you right there, and there's a link in the show notes. Episode 162 of Cyclocross Radio is brought to you by Works Hydro Shot. Ride, shred, rinse, repeat. The Hydro Shot. This has been one of our most successful sponsorships that we've had. We've sold tons of these units through Wide Angle Podium, and the reason for that is because they work, and it's kind of that missing tool in your cyclocross tool kit. It's a portable power cleaner that uses the Works 20-volt power share batteries, and it will pull from any fresh water source. We saw people because it was my own team that was using these at DCCX. Super convenient. You don't need a power source. You don't need gas. You just put the battery in there, and your power washer is ready to go. They even have like a 2-liter soft drink bottle adapter, so just for those quick shots, you can fill that up, plug in your Hydro Shot to that, and your bike is going to be super clean after that practice ride. Heck, at DCCX this last weekend, we had tons of mud. It wasn't like super thick, but it still got into your bike, and I know that after races, people were using the Works Hydro Shot to clean off their bike, so once they took it home, it wasn't mucking up their basement or their garage, or it's DC, their apartment. And we got a lot of clean bikes out there. working with Works, they were able to get us a deal that works for everyone. So if you go to yourcleanbike.com and enter the promo code CLEANBIKE, CLEANBIKE, you'll get 15% off any Hydro Shot item. That's yourcleanbike.com. Enter code CLEANBIKE at checkout. All right, let's get to it. Cyclocross Radio, episode 162. We're live from the Rapha Cycle Club. We're talking to Stephen Hyde, and we're doing that right now.
Welcome to live.
So, Stephen Hyde, you are in at DCCX for this weekend, right?
I am. We just got done with Charm City.
And this is not your first time at DCCX.
This is not my first time at DCCX.
For what some of you may not know is that Stephen actually lived in DC and worked in Georgetown.
I did. Yep. I worked right across the street here at Bicycle Pro Shop. DCCX was my first elite race I had ever done, technically, and my first DNF.
It's good to get that out of the way early.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and just lay expectations down here.
And yeah, so first elite race, for some of you that race around here, we were just pulling up the cross results. So you raced at Cyclocross.
I raced at Cyclocross.
I believe you were one of the, so this is 2011, I think we figured out.
Yeah.
So probably one of the early Sportif series leaders.
Yep.
So got to wear that red and yellow leaders jersey. Also Schoolie Mill we saw in the results as well there.
Yep.
But I think that people may know your history in cycling, but just what about being in DC? What do you remember about working and living in DC? Man,
DC was a very interesting and pivotal time for me in my cycling life. I'm not gonna say career because it didn't necessarily, the career didn't start here. It almost didn't happen here. I'm from Florida originally. I'm from Pensacola, Florida, Panhandle, Northwest Florida. And I had moved for the first time in my life out of there after traveling the country to ride BMX forever. I was 21, I think, 20. And I moved to Portland, Oregon, and worked at a shop there, moved back to Florida. My partner at the time got a job at the Library of Congress, and so I kind of went to New England for the first time to work at a bike shop for the summer on Martha's Vineyard, and in the winter came back down here to live with her and work at the bike shop. So I probably applied at 20 bike shops. I remember I flew down, I got a really cheap flight off of Martha's Vineyard, which is kind of hard to do because they're all tiny little planes and mostly private. And so I got down here, and I remember just getting one of the city share bikes and just riding it around to literally every bike shop I could, and even doing a little bit of training on one of them. I rode to Rock Creek Park and did some intervals and a little bit of mountain biking on one of the city bikes. I'm sorry. But so when I came down here, I had been all over the place. So I had really just purged a lot of my stuff. It really kind of, I was into bikes. I rode bikes a lot. I really now just commuted by bike. I had no car. I was working in bike shops. It was just, I was full on. I had frame building materials. I was full tilt nerd, loved it. And started working at the shop here, which was pretty cool because I was oh man, there's Colnagos and there's times I was a campy nerd, real hard campy nerd. And so it was really cool to be in a campy pro shop. And I was just digging through drawers basically every day. They kind of hated me. The mechanics definitely hated me. And I had done one cross race before in Florida, in Tallahassee. A friend of mine and I built up some bikes. We were this looks like a really dumb sport. Let's try it. And so we did it, and I was hooked. I was super hooked. I had a steel bike, but when I moved, that bike, who knows what happened to that bike? I have no idea. It didn't come with me here. And so I got here, and I was I'm going to get a cross bike, and I'm going to get into it, and this will be awesome because the first place I'd ever lived with a series that wasn't Portland, where I saw my first cross race. And so I got here and I was like, all right, I'm going to buy a bike. And it just kind of didn't happen. And I didn't get the bike in time for the racing to start, but I was training. I definitely was doing the weirdest stuff to train. I was living over by the Catholic University. I was riding all over their campus. I was getting kicked out of their campus every day. I was like running, doing all sorts of weird stuff on their lawn. And a friend of mine that I made through the bike shop, this guy Pat, who was like, hey, I'm going to some races, you should go with me. And I was like, oh man, I don't have a bike yet. Like I gotta build one. I don't know. And he was like, oh, I have an extra one. It's my commuter bike. It's an old Cannondale CAD. It's got a rack on it and some fenders. You could just ride that. So what started as like a, hey, you should do this one race and see how it goes, turned into basically a fall of me having him drop his bike off on Friday, me taking all of the stuff off the bike, getting some tires out of the dumpster, putting them on there, and finding somebody to drive me to the race. So it was either Pat, my friend Alex Gilman, who lived there, or who worked at the bike shop too, and her dog Lou. And basically I was just bumming rides at all these races.
What I like from this is that you've now gone your entire life without ever having to buy a Cannondale bike.
I have owned a lot, purchased none. And so I was excited about cross. I really didn't know much about it. I did one cross race in Florida before, like I said, and I got here and I really didn't know what to expect. The first race we did, I want to say it was Fort Ritchie, and I can't remember exactly. My memory is foggy of that period. And I remember it rained, and I had no idea how to ride the mud at all, and so I just ran most of it. But it was like a 3-4 race, and I won it by a long shot. I had no idea if I won it or not. I had no idea where I was, what day it was, what was on my face, and they were like, okay, cool, you won one race, and then went to the next race, and 3-4 race, and basically lapped the field, and they were like, okay, hang on. No more. You're going to do the 2-3 race. And then I think I did Schoolie Mill. I think I did the 2-3 race.
Yeah, I think we were looking. I can actually pull that back up. Hopefully it's still.
Yeah. I think that was the one. I might have been second at that one. But anyways, there was another one. I did the same thing, like basically lapped the field. And they were like.
It's pulling up to Hyde. I'm assuming that's a little later.
Yeah. So went to another race and lapped. And they were just like almost lapped. And they were like, okay, cool. Here's your upgrade again. Basically just successive upgrades.
Yeah, it was Kindercross and then Patapsco Cross.
Oh, yeah.
That's where you went to the 2-3 and then the Schoolie Mill.
Yeah. And then I kind of got my taste of more competition when Joe Dabrowski, a couple others from the area had come out and did one of the races, and I can't remember which one that one was.
It's right here, and for people who have been racing in this area a while, this is kind of fun. It's fun for me because this is when I was kind of running the series. So Joe Dombrowski won. Which race do we got here? This is Schoolie Mill.
Yeah.
Year is 2011.
Yeah.
I'm getting stuck just looking at the juniors and going, oh, they're like masters racers.
I don't remember where I don't remember where I finished there, but I do remember being super nervous, obviously, racing, and I crashed with somebody, and maybe it was Chris. I crashed, and I landed on somebody's bars really hard, and I think it dislocated a rib. And I remember hitting it and just going like, and then like laying on the ground for a second, but then getting my bike and then getting back up. And I was like racing, and I think I was crying maybe. And somebody started calling me the Badger after that, and I was just like, okay, all right. Then they called me the Honey Badger, and then little did I know that was taken already when I went to New England, and I couldn't use that one anymore.
Yes, they're very protective about their nicknames.
Sorry, Justin.
Yeah. So we got Joe Dombrowski when he was so early on. Joe was racing for Trek Livestrong. He won. Weston Schempf. Wes ended up second. Greg Whitwer was third. You were fourth.
Yeah.
Chris Beck was fifth. Pat Blair was sixth. Nick Taylor, seventh. Wow, Matt Bartlett, back when he was racing, eighth.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. And then this is like what I love about this type of stuff is that, the same thing happened with Joe, is that then you become sort of one of these, everybody was at Woodstock, and they could say years later, oh, I raced with Steven when he was in DC, but we know it was only 23 people.
Yeah.
So
it could have been.
We got Colin Reuter is able to tell us all of that.
Thanks, results boy. So I really cut my teeth here. That was it. This was like a very a pivotal time where I realized that cyclocross was not just it just wasn't just another part of bike riding for me. It was like something that I really wanted to do, something that I just happened to be good at, and that I was driven to for some odd reason. I don't know. I mean, I had a taste of everything. I did a little bit of road racing in the Southeast. I did a lot of mountain biking in the Southeast, and was pretty successful in that at that level. And I had ridden BMX my whole life and was pretty decent at it. And I just, for some reason, this was stuck. It was what made sense to me. Riding road bikes on stuff you're not supposed to ride road bikes on made a lot of sense to me.
And you, as you said, you were in your 20s when you really came to cyclocross, and not really doing any road racing or anything, but coming up through BMX, and not really racing BMX, right? It was more...
No, it was all street. It was all street, park, stuff like that. I mean, most of the time we spent in somebody's, 6 of us in somebody's Honda Accord driving across the country to get a photograph of us smashing ourselves down a handrail. It was the antithesis of this. And I when I was here, I was like, oh, I want to be a road racer. This will be great. And I was trying to get in with the clubs, and I had the 2 clubs in the area that were just like, well, you should join our club, and you should join our club. And I hadn't done any races, and I couldn't really make up my mind. But then as soon as I started racing cross, it was just like, all right, peace. Never mind. I don't need the road club. I'm fine. I'm just gonna race cross. This is it.
Well, why I bring up the BMX, and I think you're a perfect person to sort of talk about, is that there's a book, Range, and I'm blanking on the author, but his whole hypothesis is that generalists do better in the long run than specialists. And the thing where he starts the book is it's Tiger Woods compared to Roger Federer, where Tiger Woods was playing golf since he was 2 years old, and that's all he did was play golf. And then we know what happened eventually. And Roger Federer, whose parents were, his mom was like a tennis coach, but she never gave him a tennis racket, never pushed him in that direction. He played soccer until he was into his teens, did everything, and then finally was like, well, maybe I'll try tennis later on in life, and then is, arguably one of the greatest tennis players ever, and is still playing at a high level. I think he's in his 40s now. And that follows that same thing, where you weren't one of these kids who was like, okay, you're in the junior program, you're doing this is where you're moving up, you're ranked in the country. You really came into it late, and you kind of have a different perspective than all of the people you're competing against, I would say. You were on the Jam Fund. You were on the Jam Fund, and you're what? How old? You were late?
I was 25 when I joined the Jam Fund.
Yeah.
I had started and almost given up on bike racing. I was in and out of it. It wasn't like there's this huge career path that I have. Oh man, I know what to do. I can follow this. No, this is just me throwing myself at it, kind of flailing, falling down and quitting and leaving and chasing jobs and doing all sorts of things. I don't think at any point I really thought that this could be a job. I thought that I was going to ride, be a bike mechanic. I thought I was going to be a professional bike mechanic. I wanted to own a bike shop. I wanted to get into mechanicking for teams, doing all sorts of stuff. At no point did I think that I was going to be a professional bike racer. I just loved doing it. And I didn't have the avenue to race when I was younger. I grew up in pretty rural northwest Florida. There really wasn't bike riding that much. There wasn't bike racing. There was some triathlon. I went to a mountain bike race when I was 20 for the first time. I didn't get I got my own mountain bike because I worked at a bike shop, and there was this like throwaway Gary Fisher hardtail that needed to be completely rebuilt, and no one else would ride it. So that was my bike, and that was the extent of like my racing for a long time. I did one club race, bike toured all over the country. Lived in Portland, saw some racing, got interested in it, but I was just bike touring. I was tooling around on steel bikes and building touring bikes out of mountain bikes, and all the stuff you see now with like all the all the crazy builds, giant bars and stuff. Like, we're just doing that back then because it was fun, retrofitting all these mountain bikes to be just like heavy duty touring bikes and sleeping in a tarp, and yeah, I just loved bikes, and so it brought me all these different scenarios that generally made me so comfortable on the bike that you could put me anywhere. Like, I wanted to ride a unicycle in an afternoon, like that was my beer bike for a long time because you could hold two things at once, and so like put me on a bike and I'm comfortable.
Yeah.
And that's just...
Well, and I think that world experience that you have, and I think we've chatted about this before, but, when you did get to the point where you were going to Europe and having those experiences, seems like where we have some American racers who go over there and it's a tough adjustment, where you seem to be like, this is amazing, let me try to have the biggest adventure I can every time I'm here.
Yes. But at some point I did, and this comes from some of the people that are around me, some of my mentors in racing, where I got into it and I was just like, yeah, we can all just live in our car and like eat out of the dumpster. We'll be fine. This is bike racing. And at some point, the people around me were like, no. Like, let's get a nice hotel. Let's sleep some. That'd be cool. Like, eat food, et cetera, And at some point, I did actually learn a little bit. There's some like, I learned a little bit that I was being uncomfortable, and I wish I never would have done that.
Sure.
In a lot of ways, I wish I never would have figured out that I was uncomfortable, or that there was something a little bit more comfortable than I was doing. I think it would have made me adapt a lot faster. It made me Europe be even a lot easier. There's not that much of a difference between like riding your bike across the country where no one will talk to you because they think you're homeless, and going to Belgium where no one will talk to you because they think you're American. It's not that big of a difference. Yeah.
So I guess then you talk about, you sort of have this free-spirited existence. You still do, but there came a point.
I'm a mess. It's a difference.
But there came a point where you went from not really knowing anything other than that you could line up at a bike race and it seemed like you were faster than most of the other people, to someone who just getting to know you is very meticulous about your training, about what you're doing, about sort of strategizing, in and outside of a race. And I think it's just kind of interesting that once you were given those tools, you quickly adapted to that and figured out how you could really take advantage of that.
I think that the thing that was pointed out to me, the thing that really turned my attention to the idea that I could become a good bike racer wasn't that I was faster than anybody, but it was that I wanted to just kill them. Like, somebody was like, hey, when you're a different person when you line up, and like, you're a very nice person and like fun to hang out with and generally kind of an idiot. Like, but when you get on a bike and you have a lot of fun, when you get on a start line, you're a savage. And that's important because that's not something that comes easy for a lot of people. And that, when you find that in an athlete, man, if I find an athlete like that, I'm like, this person can go somewhere, because it's not trainable. You can get somebody out for hours. You can get somebody to turn better. You can get somebody to even enjoy the training a little bit, or increase their threshold or whatever. But you absolutely can't just like tell somebody how to rip somebody's throat out with their teeth. And that's what I had initially. And somebody was like, hey, you got that. Run with it. So it wasn't exactly like easy for me to figure out how to rein that in and to dial all of that. But I had good mentors, and that was important.
Yeah, and did that come from like finally hooking up with Jam and sort of going from there, or was it even before that? Because I know you've told the story about that first. I think it was like there was no way Al was gonna sign you up until you raced with them.
Yeah. I mean, the just me getting on Jam Fund was a small miracle in its own thing, and what got me there was even a bit of an odd happening. And I was working in bike shops in Florida, and there was this guy Frank Jennings who used to race with Paul Curley, etc. Had this small room apartment in Ghent, in Belgium. Raced there as a 20-year-old, 30-year-old, as an amateur. Did the whole.
Can you explain for people, because I know they've seen him, who Paul Curley is?
So Paul Curley is a legend, first of all. So he's like the New England godfather. He's a cyclocross godfather as far as the U.S. is concerned. He was one of the first guys that really went over to Europe. He went to Switzerland when Switzerland was like where cyclocross lived, before Belgium even knew what it was, and had a family that he lived with there, and just raced. And he would come back and he'd be like, guys. Check out, you're never gonna believe this. They do the dumbest thing over there, and I think we could do it too. And he was a good road racer. He's an old school. I lived in and this is why I thought it was totally acceptable. Lived in the car with like 3 other people, ate out of dumpsters, but nothing unhealthy, and divvied out prize money after they all split up the gas, and etc. So he's, this is my first contact with bike racing. There's guys like this that are like, let me tell you, kid, this is how you do it. And so his friend, Frank, whom I had heard kind of rumors about in Pensacola, just this like total in the shadows, like legend. Like, there's like this 60-year-old guy. He like rides this bike that looks like it's going to fall apart. He shows up every now and then. He owns a bike shop in New England, and every now and then scoops down, picks somebody talented up, and takes them away. And right? Yeah, pretty ominous. Yeah, pretty ominous. But so he comes in and he's just like, there was this guy Aaron Boylston who was from my area growing up, and he did the same thing. Took him up there as like to New England to race with these guys. Jason Snow was another one. I don't know if you guys ever heard of him, but he was on Jittery Joe's Criterium National Champion, Masters World Road Champion in Germany. They had this penchant for taking people under their wing and teaching them a very gritty way to be a bike racer, an old school way that they never let die. And it was very interesting for him to come down and be like, yeah, sure, just come work for me, whatever, and I'll coach you too. And, then it turned out to like, oh, this is like a real life experience. Like him and I, and I'm like, oh, it's kind of raining and cold outside. He's like, yeah, I know, we're going for a bike ride. And I'm like, okay, all right, we're going for a bike ride, I don't have a rain jacket. Cool, here's a piece of Tyvek that I took off the side of my house, put it in your jersey. True story. Like all sorts of random stuff. This is the kind of guy that he wouldn't let anybody touch his bike, his precious crappy bike, and had a little tool set in the back of his Mercedes where he just poked a bunch of holes in the liner of the Mercedes trunk and jabbed the tools necessary in there. And to a bike mechanic, I'm like, oh, cool, you got to have a lot of stuff in here. He's like, nope, it's a flathead screwdriver and a hammer. And I'm like, okay. And so he starts like letting me, hey, will you throw a new cassette on here? And I put a new cassette on his bike. And it took a long time. And then he came back. He's like, hey, you put the cassette on too tight. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, you got to be able to take it off with a flathead. I was like, okay. So this is the kind of person that I'm dealing with. A very frugal, old school, got to be able to fix it on the road with whatever, an Acorn. And you just rode your bike. and you did the same program year round. This is the old Coakley program from Switzerland, and it's the same thing everybody before him used, and taught me how to use a power meter and all of these things. But one of the cool parts about that is that gritty old school bike racer, never say die kind of bike racer, really taught me to be tougher than I thought I was going to be, or could be. And, taught me that I had some kill in me. And what I needed to do was not use that kill at the beginning of the race, but use that kill at the end of the race. And remember that, like, everybody around you is dying. You just got to be the last to die. Like, period. You just got to fight tooth and nail. And it was like this brutal existence that these guys lived, and they imparted this on me. I was like, God, this sounds terrible. So that was my experience before Jam. And working at this bike shop, there was a guy, this Brazilian guy that raced downhill World Cups back in the 90s. His name was Rodrigo. We became really good friends. We worked together at the bike shop. He was great. His English was terrible. I had to translate a lot to people, get him out of a lot of trouble. And he was like, hey, you would be really good at cyclocross. And I was like, yeah, no, I started to. You should meet my coach, Al Donahue. Rodrigo was on Jam Fun for a minute. He wanted to be the first Brazilian to go to the World Championships for cyclocross. Very much on his way to do so. However, the thing that happened to him in downhill racing happened to him in cyclocross, which was a heart condition that came out of downhill racing. That he had a bad crash, hit his chest really hard, and now he has this heart condition where every now and then, heart doesn't stop beating, goes out of control, he falls off the bike. So he gave that up, but he encouraged me and helped me, taught me, outside of this Frank and Paul realm of crazy old school bike racing, that there is some more progressive sort of racing and training, and also cyclocross is pretty cool, and then I could do it at a potentially professional level. So I get the introduction to Al. Al runs the Jam Fun. He's the A in Jam Fun, Jeremy Alec Mukunda. And we make the intro. Al's like, hey, this guy sounds great. Cool, let's meet. Well, my plan is work that summer, train a little bit. I'm working 75 hours a week at this bike shop, like just murdering myself. And also training, again, I was an idiot. And I get Lyme disease that summer. And so that kind of just, it damn near killed me, to not exaggerate. So I called it off. Took all of July, August off. Like, I worked. That was it. I lived in a house behind the bike shop. I put a hat on, a long sleeve shirt. I walked over to the bike shop, which was about the size of this building, the parking lot, and I would sit down for 30 minutes, etc. I was in pretty bad shape. So I decided that it wasn't meant to be, and I wasn't going to race cross that summer. But I was invested in the bike shop there. I wanted to... Again, I was still trying to be the best mechanic I could be. I was still trying to be the best employee I could be. I wanted to buy into this bike shop. And so one of my passions has always been teaching people where I can. So doing clinics has always been a big thing with me, going to the co-ops, going to different bike shops even to help employees out, or to regular people. And so I was like, oh, I'll go back to Portland. They built a new bike school there, a new UBI in Portland. I'll visit a friend, and I'll learn the curriculum. I'll do all this stuff and bring it back, and I'll be able to teach, and I'll be able to have a solid knowledge base that is extendable to people. And I went out. I did a little bit of bike racing. I ended up meeting somebody there that got me down to San Francisco. And bike school is great, by the way. I went down to San Francisco and even did a little bit of racing there. I won some races around that area. I met Tobin for the first time when he was a wee boy. We were on a podium together, as well as Kyle Murphy. I don't know if you guys know him. He's on Rally. Great climber. And my friend Natalia that I was staying with there was like, hey, you're pretty good at cyclocross. You should meet my coach. His name's Al Donahue. And I was like, hang on a second. Like, this guy would be great for you. He's as weird as you are. And so she was at MIT. He was a coach at MIT, other collegiate teams as well. And so I was like, all right, this is weird. Sent an email. He was like, okay, this is weird. Yeah, let's meet. This is in the cross season. So I pack up my car that I bought just to drive to Portland. I bought an old Volvo wagon, 850. God bless. And still miss that car really bad. Drove straight to New England to East Hampton. Never even heard of the place. I was camping at the Daughters of the Revolutionary War State Park. No one else was there. The park was technically closed. And right, yeah, totally sketchy. And great campground though. And I had my bikes with me, and I was super nervous, and I was pleading my case of like, please, like, come on, I really want to do this. All the stars are aligning. This should happen. And I think he was intrigued but unimpressed, which is fine. But it was like, hey, yeah, we actually have somebody that's going to take the spot. We really don't have that much space. You know, we got all these guys like Jeremy Duran, I don't know if you've ever heard of him, and Anthony Clark, and Francis Morrison, and Tom Sampson. And yeah, I think we're going to give Tom the spot that we might have for you. And so I was like, okay, fine. But, hey, you should come to a bike race with me, and it'd be fun, and we'll talk about it more. So we went to this Cheshire race, Cheshire Cross, and we were just talking about this because our host was there. So we show up. I am nervous. This is my first race in New England. I have no idea what to expect. We get out of the car. We're parked right next to Meyerson's CycleSmart van, or I think it was the Mountain Khakis van then. I'm like, I'm going to crap my pants. Oh, I don't know what to do. Al gets out. The whole Richard Sachs team's there. Dan Chavanov's there. Christian Favada back in the day, right? And all of these other just like hitters where I'm like, I thought this was a local race. Like, I don't understand. And I specifically remember asking him to help me pin my number, and he looked at me like I had two heads of like, you pin your own number. I was like, okay, cool. I know the score now. So I think I like hid behind the porta potty and like took my skid suit off and like did it. So we do this race. We start it. Oh God, I'm nervous. I'm still racing. And I realize we're halfway through the race and I'm having a blast. Like, I'm having so much fun. We're going the speed that I finally want to go. I'm with other people that I want to be. Like, I'm super and just enthralled in this. And we're ripping around, and I'm literally joking around with him. I'm like, this is awesome! Oh my God, this is great! And he just looked at me. He's sweating. Al is just sweating. Myerson's sweating. Everybody's just like dying, and I'm having a blast. And he's like, hey, dummy, attack. I was like, what? Yeah, attack the group. Like, it's racing. You should race now. So I attack. I totally blow this corner out, like, sick what skid all the way around it. Get it back together. So this course is like a baseball diamond. Little park over here, baseball diamond, long stretch around. And then it goes off in the woods. There's a big, like, railroad tie run up, and then a double track, like, descent that's kind of like... It's a sketchy descent. It's pretty fun. My cup of tea, if you will. And then this long little, like, I don't know, like a bird park walk around, and then a run up. And everybody's hanging out on the run up. So I attack. Meyerson goes with me. He's on my wheel. We go up the stairs together. We go down this chute, and I put 10 seconds into him in the descent, like in a 5-second descent. And so, like... And so I'm just doing my thing, praying that I just don't come apart because I'm going faster than I've probably ever gone down this thing. And we're ripping around. I realize I have a gap. I roll. And the story we were just talking about was that I come through this run-up, and it's silent. Everyone's like, oh, man, this guy's about to get lapped by Meyerson. golf clap, man. Good job. And then somebody was like, oh, I think that guy's leading. I think Martin's chasing that guy. So another couple of laps go on like that. And they're like, oh, yeah, that guy is definitely, whoever that is definitely leading the race for sure now. And I think the announcers had a hard time figuring it out. They're like, impossible. So I even flat on the last half lap, story of my life, and come across the line, and Meyerson's second, I think Al's third or something like that, and Meyerson's looking at me again like I have two heads, like, what did you do? What? How did you just do that? I was riding my bike the same trail you did, and you just did some sorcery, and I don't understand. I was like, I don't know. And Al rolls across the line. Welcome to the team. And that was like the best day of my life.
Amazing.
Yeah. It was the best. Total confusion. I blew up their algorithm.
Exactly. Good for you. Perfect.
Yeah, in my West Florida Wheelman skin suit, by the way. Time trial skin suit.
Nice. Yeah. So we are coming up. I want to make sure that everybody gets an opportunity to ask some questions. But one thing, we've sort of been living in the past here for the last 40 minutes, which is awesome. I always love hearing these stories. But just coming to present day and where we're at, and I think that it's not a secret that North America's going through some, I don't know if it's growing pains or even constriction pains or something as far as the cross scene is concerned. And we're all doing a little bit of hand wringing and all trying to figure out what the next best step is, especially with an international governing body that may not always, who I think 10 years ago was excited about racing in the U.S., may not have that same level of excitement anymore. And we're losing UCI races, and World Cups are still up in the air, and I think all of that together sort of has you kind of thinking about this a little more, and that sort of came out on social media this week and sort of raised a little bit of a storm, I'd say.
A little bit. And I don't know if you guys follow me on Twitter, but man, I'm not on Twitter that much. So for me to get a wild hair and really go out there, I was pretty fired up. However, I have digressed from that. What I'm seeing right now, and I think what a lot of people are seeing, is that we've really made a push in the U.S. for cyclocross. I came in as the USGP went away. I watched the USGP. It's what made me excited about cyclocross. It's what made me excited about racing. It gave me the idea that I could be a professional.
And if people don't know, the USGP was the last true national series that we had in the country, and it's kind of this shining star that everybody looks like, oh, we just need something like the USGP to come back, and then everything will be fine. All of the top racers will go to the same races. There'll be prize money. People can make a living doing this.
Kind of our last gold standard.
Yeah, it had its issues, as everything does, but that really is what people look at, like, how do we get back to this?
Yeah, and it has issues and whatever, and there's a lot of great people behind that are still in the scene and still trying to do things. And, USA Cycling tried to pick up some of the slack on that and created the Pro CX. And, with all these really good intentions, have, I think, still kind of kept cyclocross afloat in a lot of ways, where it has become a little less organized in other ways. We have also had this problem of conflict across the country, right? We've had a lot of issues with, now that there's no series, what's keeping any promoters from wanting to promote their race on a weekend that may be on another race, right? And what's happened also is from that USGP push, where we had this opportunity to race for a cash prize, where we all were like, I say we, I'm including myself, but I wasn't even there. What was happening was that these professionals are going like, oh, there's something to go for. There's a trophy at the end. There's money mostly to pay for our the lives of people and for teams and etc. And sponsorship return. And there was a shift at some point where UCI points became a real concern for people. And, you know, the thing that the USGP did was it raised the level of US cyclocross. It was no longer one or two people that were really good. We all of a sudden had this crop of really good riders, of really good men and women that were, you know, Katie Compton was a big part of that, right? And like all these people that just really raised up. We had mountain bikers coming in, we had road racers coming in to race cyclocross because it was a thing.
You had teams who were racing as teams against each other, not just,
teams.
You know, where we're all privateers now.
Yeah, and some of those teams are still around. A lot of them went away. And somehow, you know, once we got to that level, it was like, okay, cool. What's the next level? And what's always the next level? It's for us. It's going to Europe, and it's doing that. And so we're like, okay, points. Everybody points. And C1 started popping up all over the place, and it was like a C1 handout where everybody got C1, and you know, they worked hard for it. They paid a lot of money for it. They promoted it. They did all these things. And so then we got really C1 heavy, and then all of a sudden, now we have a very good way to get a lot of points to get to Europe. We don't have a lot of ways to return the investment that people have into domestic cycling. We don't have a lot of ways for athletes to make a living to do that, to then go to Europe. It is expensive to do that. It's expensive for the teams to foot the bill, or the privateers to foot the bill, or the federation to foot the bill. Cyclocross has not been an Olympic sport. It's not an Olympic sport. So therefore, it hasn't gained any funding from federations, right? So these teams, these individuals are all on their own for this. Whereas track racing, mountain biking, etc., get some funding for the Olympic programs, for good or bad. And so then there's this points race. So then we have a couple of people that get really good. Look at Powers. He went over. He did a lot of really good racing. I mean, the guy was in the top 10 in the World Cup overall. Like, I personally saw the guy get 8th at Hyde. Like, all these things, like, it was a real, like, oh my God, you can do it. But the back end started to fall off. And so then the talent started to go away. We have this big crop of U23s, but where are they going to go? There's no jobs for the U23s. So we find ourselves in this almost like the World Championships come to Louisville, really ignite a fire. They did an amazing job with that. Holy crap, that's probably like the most storied, you know, World Championships. Like, we almost lost the thing. It changed dates. Like, that never happens.
But lost its main sponsor.
Yeah. Yep. So then we see that in all the spikes and you know, the all the data says that, you know, that was the golden, the peak of U.S. cycling in general. Peak in cyclocross. And then it's all kind of petered down from there. And it's, you know, better or worse some years. It's not all down, and this year it's actually up a little bit. Interest in cyclocross, which you know, is another topic. And then we had the U.S. Cup come in. We had Ryan Tremont and Scott Tedrow really pushing that, and you know, in Ryan's retirement, needed something to do. And I think he really wanted to help the riders. Like, he really, 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 really wanted to help the riders. You know, Show Air really wanted to show support, really wanted to bring up the level because they're you know, they're fans. Tedrow's a fan. He's really into cycling, and that's really cool to see. And he brought all this cash in, and they brought this infrastructure in. But you know, then we all of a sudden have this still pretty fractured points race and some money in a series, and it was successful, I think, to a big degree. And it, of course, it went away. Unfortunately, things happen. It, you know, the model wasn't solidified in that way.
Well, it was almost it was still in the petri dish. You know,
Totally.
it was that first year. It was like, this is what we can do, and then the rug was just pulled out, and then it was gone.
Yeah, we needed another year to solidify competition. We needed another year to tell a story, to get our narrative across to the sponsors, to the country, to the world, etc. And so, and now we're, you know, we still have the US Pro CX as a you know, a quote series. It's a list of races that exist of UCI races.
Does anybody here know who's winning the US Pro CX either on the men's or women's side? Oh, Yeah? Who?
Curtis White.
It's a good guess. Do you know for sure?
Carrie Warner.
I don't know either. I'm just asking. That's my point.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm in it. But I think it might be Carrie. But anyway, so I mean, we're not in bad shape right now. We're not dead. Cyclocross is a big thing. People love cyclocross. I love cyclocross. You guys are here because you probably love cyclocross too. The country as a whole, I think, likes cyclocross. It's like cycling's fun cousin, kind of. And it's not going to go away. But I think what we can do is hopefully revamp it a little bit. And I want to hope that there's enough interest still and ideas out there still, and I'm not saying that I have them, to continue where that US Cup and where the USGP and garner some more interest and get a new model for what racing looks like specifically in this country. And I think that's very important because right now we're at a turning point where I think the U.S. Internationally has to kind of pay attention to what we are doing and not what the rest of the country is doing, or rest of the world is doing. I'm sorry, specifically Belgium.
Yeah, and that's kind of the evolution that I've sort of gone through personally, is that you get into the sport and you see these athletes and you're like, oh, it's going to be great when they go to Europe. I can't wait to see what Steven does in Europe. I couldn't wait to see what Jeremy did in Europe. And I think the more that I'm involved in it, the more I'm like, well, let's see what we can do in the U.S. I mean, I'm just kind of reevaluating why that's the dream versus building what we can here. And the model for that is if you look at Switzerland. Switzerland used to be Belgium before Belgium was Belgium. Switzerland used to be the home of cyclocross. And it's, for the longest time, it wasn't, the Dutch and the Belgians, because they had, banks and auto dealers and construction companies and flooring companies who all were like, this is our great local sport here, and we're going to pour all this money into it, and everybody can stay here and race, and it's awesome. And it is awesome. I mean, it's the superstars of the sport, and that's great. Switzerland now has said, okay, we're going to go back and build our own thing again. That's the EKZ series, if you've seen that, and it's great. And there are people who they could drive to Belgium to these races, but they don't. They stay in Switzerland, and they do it. We're expecting everybody to fly to Europe to do these races. So,
and likewise, fly here from Europe to do our races for like the World Cup when they bring that over.
So the question is, why do we do that to ourselves? Why do we have all these races that want to be on the same dates just to say that they want to have a race, instead of try to figure out a way where the incentive is to race against the best, and then you have our best athletes? So I don't know why they can't be as good as any other athletes in the world. They can race here. And then you want to get everybody together. It's like the World Series. It's called Worlds. You go to Worlds and you race Worlds. You can still race the World Cups. I mean, that's still there. But in between that, I'd love now, and it truly is in the last year or so, I've sort of changed completely on this, where I really would love to see what we can do in this country. And I think from that builds up the amateur levels again to where there's interest, because in November and December, everybody isn't gone. You're still getting to see Stephen Hyde race. You're still getting to see everybody race in the U.S. So it's just, I think I'm not alone in this. I think a lot of people are sort of thinking along those same lines.
Yeah, I'm really interested. I'm very, very interested. I was pretty fired up when I got on Twitter. I was totally mostly complaining. I'm very interested in what everyone has to think or has to say about it. I mean, there's ideas out there. The golden ticket is out there. Somebody's got it. And there's also somebody that wants to help. And there's always the people that want to help. And there's always the people that are going to be able to do this. And I'm not necessarily saying I'm the guy that's going to do that. But I still have some racing to do.
Yeah, and I would also say with all of that, I still love the sport, and I still think it's doing awesome. And I think that, yes, maybe we're not still going up, but I mean, if we look at DCCX, I can tell you from me and the rest of the race organizers, we got higher reg than we did last year. So it's still there, and we were not expecting that. We thought we'd see a little drop off, and it didn't happen. So that's pretty cool.
I just, in my pitch, and I'll probably leave it at this, is that when we have conflicting races, and this is not necessarily race promoters' fault or racers' fault. Right now, we're in a points race where everybody wants points to go to Europe, and they want to have a better start position, and they want to have a better start position for nationals, etc. It's reasonable. However, being on the front, and I will tell you from first-hand experience, is that being on the front row of a race that you're mildly qualified to be in is not all it's cracked up to be. I would rather be ready to fight and more talented and more accustomed to battles and harder racing and be on the fifth row than be 20th place material on the front row of a race that it's going to be hard. It's cool. I've done plenty of funny faces on the front of some European races, but did I necessarily belong there? Maybe I could have been 2 rows back and been just as good. I would have finished in the same spot. Really doesn't matter that much. So anyway, I want the competition. As a racer, I want competition. Because competition, I want to get beat so that I'm pissed off enough to go train, and I want to be better, and I want to incrementally be better. And that's what we all want as athletes. Getting points by going to a race where not everybody's at, kind of sniping those points, if you will, it's never going to work. That's not going to get us anywhere.
And from my standpoint, I don't want to tell that story. I mean, not that I want you to lose, but I want you to have, competition. I want there to be, honestly, what we saw at Charm City with you and with Curtis and Carey and even Lane there. It was a great battle for the whole race. And
sure, but throw another podium's worth of people in there.
For sure. And that was a split. And that was a split weekend. You didn't have Gage there. You didn't have Lance there. You didn't have Tobin and all those guys. Mm-hmm. So throw that into the mix, and it's completely different. All right. Before we continue to talk for the rest of the night on this, I do want to open up the floor, and if anybody has any questions for Stephen.
So you're currently 5th in the Pro CX rating. If you Google US Pro CX leader, you get actually a nice picture of Jeremy Powers there. So
perfect.
That's where it is.
I'm glad he's still around.
That was the last person to do a press release on the Pro CX.
Kerry Warner is leading it.
Okay.
Curtis White is just behind him.
Great.
I've on some of the social media seen Walvin Art and you having a friendship. Can you tell us a little bit about what it's like to be in that, and what lessons he taught you or you taught him, those type of things? Yeah,
I would say I'm probably his mentor. No, I forget that the kid's 10 years younger than I am. I always do. No, it is really cool. One of the things that I think has helped me in Europe and to adapt is just being, be willing to look like an idiot or talk to people or whatever, just be outgoing in that. And there's this interesting stigma of these European riders among the US base of oh, those guys are terrifying, or they're stuck up or whatever, any kind of the whole don't meet your idols thing, right? They're people. And so it's been a really interesting thing for me to make friends and help out or get help from or ask help from, and that's been a lot of it for me, is just asking for help, which nobody seems to want to do. And with Welton in particular, the kid's golden. He's a really nice guy. He was always very outgoing with me, and I was just okay, cool. I can get with this, and his English is decent because my Dutch is not. And so it was an interesting dynamic between us where, I don't have access to that kind of star power kind of rider where man, everything the guy touches is gold, and this training is sought after, and all of these things, and it seems like everyone in Belgium would give up their firstborn for the guy, right? And so, but that also comes, I think, with, and he may or may not agree with this, I think an interesting bit of people around you that may or may not seem disingenuous, right? Or may have agenda around that. And so I saw that in him, and I was just like, oh man, this kid needs like somebody to joke around with. I definitely need somebody to like lighten my load here, and like be a friend. And I think it was really quick to just be like, oh cool, you're a friend. That's great. And that was really awesome. It was very relieving. And then, at some point I was like, yeah, I'm going to go to Spain and do this thing. And he's like, oh, I'm going to Spain. He's like, you just want to go with me? I don't have anyone else to go with. I was like, yeah, whatever, man, let's do it. And the Belgian press loved that. I had 3 interviews. I had people I had the Gazette come to, where I was staying in the Netherlands, and they were just like, who are you and what are you doing? Like, why?
It's like Cheshire Cross all over again.
100%. They were like, no, what? Come on, why? Why this guy? He could hang out with like the Belgian Oprah if he wanted to, Like, yeah, this is a weird guy. Yeah, what's that? Is he British? Yeah. Yeah, and so it's been really cool, and I think one of the interesting things is I've actually been able to at the same time be like, hey, you know what? Like, there are some things I think I can add to this conversation too. Like, it's not just me asking you for things like, what do we do for training? What do we, like when I went to Spain with him for 2 weeks, it was like, wiped my training off the block. And it was just like, I will do whatever you do, maybe a little less hard. But we were training, and this is like the 5th day in, and we're just like motoring along. We're on the 5th hour of this ride, and I'm just like, eyeballs are coming out of my head, and I'm like, I'm dead. This is it. And he just looks over, he goes, oh, I'm cracked. And I was like, oh, yes. Thank you. You're a human being. That's amazing. And I am not garbage. And that was a real turning point where I was just like, oh, okay, cool. Maybe I can fill in some of the cracks still for him and help too, and it's been pretty interesting. Like, we'll be at the World Championships in Valkenburg, and it was kind of cool where like I saw a line that nobody else was really doing, and that course was unreal. And when you're an athlete like that, you're at the World Championships, you're the guy who's supposed to win World Championships. There's a lot of pressure, and there's a lot of people with opinions, and there's a lot of people trying to steer you in the direction they want you to go in, to grab your attention, to do all these things. It's a lot. Even just at the national level for me. I mean, like, you see me at the course at any given race, I'll say hi, we'll hang out, whatever. At the national championships, not a chance. I got a job to do, right? And so it was cool to just be like, hey man, come over here for a second. Check this thing out. And he's like, cool, you do it. And I, do the line. And I was like, that was mediocre. And he's like, yeah, it was. He did it. And he was like, don't tell anybody about that. Thank you for not crashing on my line, sir. We all know how that race went, so that was pretty cool. And, not saying I won that race for him, but, like...
No, let's just say it. Let's just say that.
Okay, well... Yeah, hey, you said it. So anyways, it's just been really cool to, like, have that kind of relationship with someone I never thought that I would have, a decent relationship with. And it's really cool to see him as a mentor in a lot of ways and as, like, an idol, but also see him as, like, a 25-year-old kid. And then, a 22-year-old kid, 23-year-old kid, who was literally like, hey, I don't know how to do laundry. I'm like, okay. I can handle that. It's been fun. And I have other relationships in Europe that are really cool and that mean a lot to me. And that is something that I didn't think that I was going to have moving into the professional ranks, that I thought once you're there, it's just like cutthroat and everybody hates each other and whatever. And like, turns out some of these racers are my best friends, and it's really relaxed me as a person and as an athlete, and really kind of driven my want to help out more riders of the highest level and of the lowest level. It's cool.
Thank you. Yeah. Like 2 more questions. Anybody has anything?
I have a story.
Let's do it.
It's a DC story. It's kind of funny. I was thinking about it today. So I went out I used to train before I would go to Georgetown to work. So I'm out the door at 5 o'clock. I actually did a lot of training in the cemetery over by your house, the big one, in the dark, and yeah, cemetery and chill, man. So, anyways, I'm out. I'm following this old school program, and I'm cracked. And this might be the most cracked I've ever been to that point. So bonked that I'm not sure where I'm at. I'm somewhere in Georgetown. I'm riding home. I still am on 4th and what did I say? 4th and over there.
Franklin?
Yeah, 4th and Franklin. That's where I lived. I have no idea how I'm going to get home. I have no money. Zero money. I don't have a phone. I didn't have a phone. And I'm just sitting at this little intersection, and I'm like all but falling off my bike. I don't know what I'm going to do. Before the shops are open, and I look over, and it's fall, and somebody has a decorative pumpkin sitting on their front porch, and I leaned my bike up, and I walked over the little fence, and I sat on their porch for a little bit, and just made sure no one was home. And I cracked the pumpkin open, and I ate the damn thing. Anyways, I've been dying to tell you guys that.
Well, I think that's a good place to end. Yeah. So thank you, Stephen, for coming out tonight, and thank all
you
of you. Thanks also to Rapha for, again, having this location where we can come out and have these events. And if Ed was talking about it earlier, but definitely look into the RCC and look into hooking up with those guys because they put on great events. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you very much.